I think I need my own cup, my own mug. So that's how we're gonna judge the length of the show. When the cup runneth out, then the show runneth out.
I don't know how fast you drink.
I'm getting angry right now. I'm gonna like trash this the studio. It is literally made to make people unhealthy and chubby, and so this stuff is everywhere.
You are listening to Constantly Varied. I'm Brian Cauley.
I'm Dhani Oks. Prepared. How was your week?
It was good. Actually, I woke up today like ridiculously sore. It's like, it's one of those, one of those weeks where you're just like, I'm just gonna work out a ton.
Yeah.
It was one of those. I actually, last night I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna go to CrossFit. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna go to the class tonight. And then I did the exact opposite. Like, did the WOD and then did yoga after that.
Yeah.
And then went and saw a documentary. It was like, I went from
doing
nothing.
That's like a triathlon.
Yeah, it was
CrossFit, yoga. It's the West End triathlon. CrossFit, yoga, and like an artful documentary.
Yeah, if you live on the West End
Hipster Triathalon.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly.
I had this hashtag on Twitter. I tried to get it going, which was Hipster Triathalon, and I forget what. It wasn't. I think that was between you and me, maybe. But we were trying to get ideas of what a good hipster triathlon would be. It'd probably be like go to Bellwoods Park. Right.
Yeah.
Drink a Paps, and then take your bike to the repair shop or something. Get new yellow tape.
You know what's that thing that yeah. Okay. Was I telling you that about how
you invented yellow tape?
Yeah. I'm saying it publicly too. I've had. Yeah, we were talking about the idea of sort of a collective consciousness and how I have yellow tape on my handlebars. But my handlebars have always had yellow tape, and now it's becoming really popular. And it was just like you
were the tipping point.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, not like just the idea of you see it more and more, and like it just starts permeating.
Yeah, yellow stands out, right? So
yeah, and I probably picked it off of something too, but
maybe. But what's the likelihood that it was just yellow's time? You know what I mean? Like, if you follow this collective unconsciousness or collective consciousness argument, things bubble up, and simultaneously all over the world, maybe there's some guy in Papua New Guinea who just spontaneously put yellow, on his handlebars, and there's some guy in, northern China who put yellow tape on his handlebars, completely unrelated to you. I heard this actually. The same concept in relation to comedy and jokes. Like, some comedians are really fussy about other comedians, for good reason, stealing their material. So there's this other argument in that, well, it's just in the exploration of things. Of course, people from around the world are going to come to the same conclusion, right? Like, ideas don't just happen one at a time. That'll happen collectively, and maybe it's just that was the time for the yellow handlebars.
Yeah. Because as you said that, I was thinking like the Pantones, which are just sort of this general design kind of language of color, but there's like a Pantone organization.
Right. Yeah.
And they make all those color swatches.
They invent colors, yeah.
And I think you were drinking out of I have a Pantone mug that's like recycle can blue. So it's the Pantone of what most recycling bins are. Actually, Ontario's recycling bins or Toronto's recycling bins aren't as nice.
It's like blue. A brand. It's like the blue thing is like a specific blue.
Yeah.
People probably get really uptight about
their Pantones.
About their Pantone. Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's part of your trademark.
And they come out with a color every year. They're like, so we're coming up on 2013, so there'll be a color of 2013, and
that's great. Like, they invent a color?
No, like they just take one of their Pantones.
This
is the color of the year, and like so they did.
So they get to say, what a bunch of fucking.
Well, do they get to say
egotistical bastards? Like, this is the color of the year.
We decide.
But
if you're the Pantone industry, like,
what was I watching? It was Fuck, I can't believe I'm gonna admit this, but it was not my fault. It was an ex-girlfriend's insistence.
Always the ex-girlfriend.
Swear to God, it was The Devil Wears Prada.
I've seen that. I'll admit I've seen that. That's okay.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, there you go. I've seen Devil Wears
Meryl
Prada.
Streep's in it.
She's in it.
You're allowed, like, if Meryl Streep's in a movie.
What's that chick's name?
Anne Hathaway.
She's super hot. Yeah. And she's like hot in the way that like you think that she would be really nice to you, even if you weren't nearly as hot as her. Like she would just be kind of a cool chick to.
I don't know.
Talk to.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
I'm just saying she has that thing going on, like that geeky kind of hot going on.
I've always stood back on I'm not with everyone else. I feel on Anne Hathaway. It's like Anne Hathaway is my version of your Tom Hanks.
Oh really?
Kind of. Yeah, like she just annoys me.
You just don't like her. Wow, really? Okay.
It was really hard for me to...
Well, Anne and I will never ask you out for dinner.
When you two are together, right?
Yeah, when we're together.
So you're watching Devil Wears Prada.
On the insistence of an ex-girlfriend. That's why she's an ex-girlfriend. But, so we're watching Devil Wears Prada. But there was some ridiculous point in the whole thing about how fashion matters and how, like, some small group of people decide that, like, green sweaters are going to be in, and then there's this, like, whole process where they start to put it on the runways of, like, Paris or whatever, and it's, like, these ridiculous designs.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Just, like, they're completely out of touch with the regular kind of, middle America kind of, kind of guy and gal. Like, no one's ever going to wear these things, but they have a particular color or they have a particular look. And then that sort of gets filtered down through, couture to, like, some of the mid-level, fashion places, and then down to, like, Target and Walmart. And then a year and a half later, for some reason, every housewife is wearing this, like, green sweater. So they make that point that, like, a few people kind of decide what the color is going to be, and then it just gets completely filtered down. Like, it's interesting because it's like you hear all this shit. You hear this shit in magazines. It's like, like these boots are hot this year. Like, I don't understand why. What makes this ugly thing hotter than this ugly thing, and it's totally ugly until we all agree it's not anymore. And it's kind of weird. Like, fashion's kind of like that,
Well, yeah, it's like how sometimes you look back and you just go, I cannot believe that that we wore that, or vice versa. When you talk about sort of certain places and certain high fashion cities come out with things first, and it takes a while for stuff to reach other areas. I mean, Canada is in, like, especially like Toronto and Montreal. They're catching up to a lot of the major European cities. But it still takes time. So sometimes people go over in Europe and they're like, "Oh, we're doing this ridiculous thing," and then a year later they're like, "Yeah, we're doing that.
We're doing it. It's just less ridiculous. It's more, I guess, like mainstream and less edgy, and it's just kind of whatever. It's an H&M, right?
Well, yeah, it's like
that style
platforms. Like, they were like high fashionable platforms, and then they were stupid, and then everyone...
I did not know that. I guess.
They
platform shoes.
Like, well, then Skechers started coming out with platform like sneakers, and it was just like
Skechers. Oh my god.
Oh, it was terrible.
They have the worst shoes. Like those stupid. Like, they look like little boats, and the ones that
they're like those kids. They're like what you see in a kid's playground.
They're shape ups. That's what they're called. And I think
they rocking chairs for your
feet.
They're
like rocking chairs, and they're so, like, the premise is so fucking ridiculous. I'm getting angry right now. I'm gonna like trash this the studio, but they're so ridiculous because it's like, well, you can burn more calories in these shoes for some weird reason. I'm like, what the fuck, you lazy son of a bitch? Like, how about you just
because you'll be standing up rocking on your feet versus sitting down.
I don't know. We got to look it up and actually get the real claim. But I've been on. I think some other company makes a similar version. I was on the website and I was looking at the data, and it's just such ridiculous, like, shake weight-esque stuff. It's so frustrating. The whole fitness industry is just a bunch of lies in general, and it's just amazing that people continue to fall for, like, the same snake oil.
Yeah, that's kind of like a sad thing, is that there's a lot of things I think that either when they start or at their core have a lot of awesome ideals and fundamentals, and then people who maybe just out of sheer laziness recognize, oh, we can do something that maybe people will closely associate with this, and we'll just hop on the bandwagon. And because, like, wanting to be fit is awesome.
Yeah.
And of course people are going to try and do it as easily as possible.
Oh, totally. I believe it. It's, we look for the best tools that we have available, right? I have this like analogy where, if your cat is sick and you go to the strip mall and there's in the strip mall, there's a vet and there's a mechanic, and you go to the vet and the vet is closed. So your cat is sick. It's an emergency. You can't help it. So you go to the next available spot, which is the mechanic. And the mechanic, what's he going to do? He's probably going to grab some sort of power tool and like hack a foot off to save your cat from being more sick. And that's the best tool he has for the job. And he's just trying to do what he can. Is it the best solution? Like, hell no. But that's kind of what you have available to you. So, it's one of my teachers, he told me that, like, the more sophisticated you become, the more behavioral options you have. So I think that's very much true. It's like the more options that you realize you have to fix problems. The fitness thing is really kind of weird because people are very susceptible to lies, just because they're in such a vulnerable state when it comes to fitness. They're so wrapped up in
there's so many like issues about just preconceived notions, body image, like even the concept of what is health.
Yeah.
Like you have even all these like shows and ads that are saying, do this, eat these things, drink this much water, take this many pills. No, don't drink that much water. No, these pills are now bad. These ones are good.
Yeah.
It's
and it seems to change all the time.
That's the biggest thing. It's like the advice is constantly changing.
It's constantly varied. And that's not a good thing for advice. I mean, there's, science is science, right? It's totally an ongoing thing. It's by no means static. And it's also very susceptible to the subjectivity of the scientist, right? There's this whole, especially in the nutritional paleo community, there's this whole, hate on for Ancel Keyes, the guy who essentially really pushed for this, like, what they call like the Lipid Hypothesis. The idea that we get fat because we consume fat. We get in trouble with cholesterol because we consume cholesterol, which is really bullshit. And the dude, if anyone wants to read about this...
there's a couple of people whose minds, just with that sentence, by the way, that you've like blown. They're like, whoa, wait, what? Yeah. Fat doesn't get me fat?
I know. How weird is that? Fat does not make you fat. It's just an absolutely crazy thing to believe, but it's true. It's true.
I eat a ton of fat.
So do I. I mean, I should say that I should add a caveat that, good fat will not make you fat. Bad fat, yeah, of course, that will make you fat, but not necessarily because it's like high calorie or because it's fat. There's other problems with it. It'll cause inflammation and other things that essentially lead to like a metabolic train wreck. So really, this guy, Gary Taubes, who wrote this really big tome called Good Calories, Bad Calories, which is not the greatest title because it sounds like a diet book, but it's not a diet book. It's about how we've been fed, pun intended, this bullshit for the last number of years. How as a civilization, I'm talking about the whole world, we have more information about nutrition and health and more technology. We have more books in our libraries about fitness and health, more podcasts, yet we're getting fatter and less healthier, right? So how is this possible? And the problem is that we have a system that is built around this concept that, if you eat fat, you're going to get fat. If you eat a lot of cholesterol, you're going to, whatever, you're going to get a heart attack. We have a huge vegetarian, vegan lobby as well, which is, unfortunately, speaking as a former vegetarian vegan who is very adamant about it, is a little bit misdirected, in my opinion, and several others. So you have this like total crazy flip-flop of a paradigm.
Yeah.
And it is kind of changing now. I think the internet has really spurred this new era of communication and innovation in health communication. That was like, whoa, that was a crazy series of rhymes right there.
Yeah, that was
the
good.
Internet.
It was like an ad
innovation,
for the
communicate. Yeah, brought to you by.
It was like one of those PBS.
Yeah. Totally, man. Wow.
This message. But you're right, like, because now, I mean, people who like really want to know, like, I'm on Tumblr like crazy. I love it so much, and which is something I was kind of skeptical about in the beginning. But there are so many Tumblr blogs about fitness and nutrition and like even just Pinterest photos and stuff. And I'm noticing that for the most part, a lot of it's pretty solid. But if it's not, like, these discussions just erupt, or like people are just asking other people about questions. Like they see someone who seems really fit and they're like, what do you do?
What do you do?
And it's not some loaded thing.
You know what's fucked up about that too? The people who like just have always looked fit, they probably do some of the worst things. Like one of our mutual friends, I don't want to name his name, but he is like lean as hell. He's the kind of person you hate because he could literally be holding a bag of rocks, and he could not gain any weight. You know what I mean? Like he could step on a scale and then you give him a bag of rocks and the scale would stay the same. That's how his metabolism works. Like he does not put on any weight.
The rocks would just get
absorbed. The rocks would become obliterated in his like 0 calorie field of being. So anyway,
it's an alternate universe.
Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, so the point is this guy is ridiculously lean. So he's entering a donut eating contest tonight, and which is hilarious. But I forget what my point was. But it's funny because
just how like some people you have to really look at and go, their body is not necessarily the same as my body.
No, exactly. So the point was that there's a lot.
It's like if I went into the donut eating contest and ate the giant donuts, I would not look like this other. I know who you're talking about. I wouldn't look like this other person.
Oh hell no!
I wouldn't be this. I'm not like super lean, and I have to like really be conscious about what I eat. Like my older sister, she's same family.
Yeah.
And she's really conscious about what she eats, but it's much more, I think, from a nutritional, hormonal standpoint.
Yeah.
She could eat garbage, she'd feel like garbage, but
like I think it'll eventually catch up to you. You know what I mean? But this guy in particular, the reason I bring this up is, and others like him, I think they're kind of genetic outliers. Like you have people who are like this. They tend to end up, if they're really like muscular and fit, they tend to end up in sports, right? Because they're essentially genetically almost indestructible. So they can eat almost anything and still perform at a very high level. The argument is they could probably do better if they had a healthy diet, but since they're so far ahead of everyone else, it almost doesn't ever occur to them to eat well.
Yeah.
So basically you have like baseball's notorious for people who have like shit diets. Like shit diets.
Oh, when I was watching the World Series, they did this video of like what baseball players eat on the bench or before the game.
Yeah, it's like the weirdest sport. It was like it feels like baseball was invented for like lazy people just to kind of like hang out and not feel bad about it, because you sit most of the time, you know what I mean? And the game has no clock, so there's no pressure, and you're chewing tobacco and sunflower seeds, and you pretty much like are drunk in the clubhouse right after the game, and even pitchers don't even necessarily pitch every day. It's pretty funny. Even the guy who's like in the American League anyway is like there's a designated hitter because God forbid you should actually go and do some fielding. So it seems like the game is based around laziness. But the point I'm trying to make here is that you have, people are always looking for, like this happens in health clubs all the time, like like commercial gyms, they'll hire the most buff looking guy or girl. And in my experience, the most buff looking people tend not to be the most intelligent with their nutrition. They kind of just they kind of just go to GNC and pick up whatever packaging looks good. And what they're doing is nothing really good for themselves, but because their genetics are so superior, it's not really affecting them quite yet. So, and people look at, whoa, Michael Jordan's drinking Gatorade, so I'm going to drink some Gatorade. Meanwhile, Gatorade is probably like one of the most awful things you could be consuming if you want to be, healthy. So it would always make me laugh when I was at the gym, and I would see people who have clearly have weight to lose. Like I shouldn't say weight, fat is more specific, and their bodies aren't really functioning all that well, and they finish a fairly mild workout. You know what I mean? Like whatever on the elliptical machine, and then some of this, and then they're just chug back Gatorade and whey, and I'm like, whoa, you just wasted whatever benefits you got.
And there's probably a lot of people who are right now going, maybe there aren't. But some people who, and I remember when I was back on the stage of thinking, oh, Gatorade's awesome. So clarify that.
Gatorade's marketing is awesome. The original Gatorade, interesting enough, tasted like shit and was actually pretty good. It was invented at the University of, if I'm not mistaken, Florida Gators. That's why they call it Gatorade. And it was basically tasted like salt water.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, it tastes like shit. I actually prefer the old taste, funny enough, because when you really need electrolyte replenishment, it's like it almost doesn't even taste bad. So yeah, it tastes like you're licking your own sweat essentially.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what it is.
Like sodium, yeah.
Yeah, there's I forget the electrolytes are like sodium, potassium, magnesium, and some other things, and so and incidentally, it's easy enough to make your own Gatorade, or you can just get like a really good coconut water. That's why coconut water is getting really popular. So, and it's just like, you're sold all this horse shit about all these like products that will make you feel better, but they literally do nothing for you. And in the case of Gatorade, which I believe at least some of their formulation, and at some point all of their recent formulations had high fructose corn syrup, which is a horrible, horrible thing to consume. It's like, okay, Brian, you're going to challenge me to invent a very efficient food, okay? And that food is going to is going to guarantee to make people fit. It's going to guarantee people are going to get fat, okay? And what I'm going to invent is high fructose corn syrup. It is literally made to make people unhealthy and chubby. And so this stuff is everywhere, and it's funny that it how insidious it is, and yet people don't really seem to be paying too much attention.
Flip over so many labels. That's when you were talking about GNC, and I remember going in there one time, and
we're gonna get sued this episode. We've dropped so many corporate names. We're kind of gonna get fucked. Oh well.
Whatever.
We're just telling it like it is, people.
Telling it like it is.
Telling it like it is.
I went in there, and they
have some good stuff though too. I'll say. Lately, they've had some better stuff, but I'm just saying. Anyway. Well,
no, they had these like vitamin C chews, and they were awesome. Yeah. And when I flipped it over, I was like, oh yeah, this is great. And I flipped it over, and the first like 3 ingredients were something based in
like sugar
and corn syrup.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and then I was talking to my friend who's a nutritionist, and she was like, yeah, why would you buy vitamin C chews anyways? Like, how hard is it to get vitamin C? Like, that's the easiest vitamin to get. Like, exactly. Why don't go buy like a vitamin B plus chew?
Yeah,
something that's a little bit.
Why does it have to be a chew? Like, what are we little fucking babies?
I don't know. It tasted delicious.
It's ridiculous. Like, it sounds good. It's like
they had free samples, but yeah, that's exactly.
It reminds me of Big League Chew. Now that's a good product. Big League Chew.
Big League Chew's awesome. Loads of sugar, but
who cares?
Delicious.
I say, you know what? If you're gonna fucking party. Well, my biggest pet peeve is I remember I was at Dean Center, and this was a couple years ago, and they had this like demo on. So these people were like fucking dancing around like assholes with these like yellow shirts.
You were clearly in like Eaton Center mode of agitation, like Eaton big Center. Mall agitation.
Fuck, man, Eaton Center is just like it's don't get me started, but
it's a mall plus tourists. You do the math.
It's intense. Not quite as bad as like just a Walmart in general, but still bad. So yeah, and I'm walking through, and there's a bunch of like young, very excited people in like yellow polo shirts that say Fiber One, and they're just like making it rain with like all these energy bars they're throwing out. And, like, they're just like tossing them up in the air, and people are just like, oh, Fiber One, and it's like the name is so deceptive. It's like Fiber One. Okay, cool. Well, fiber's good for me, right? Okay, and so they're handing this shit out, and they give one to me, and I'm like, not so fast, and I flip it over. And I'm seeing like
please tell me you actually said not so fast.
Not so fast, youngin. Like it's like fiber is good for you, and I'm like, oh really? Explain why. And then it's like fiber is good for you. It's like that's all they were programmed to say.
Autopilot.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like they're in trade show mode. Yeah. So, and you flip it over, and it's like the first 9 ingredients are basically some kind of sugar, all right? Between like corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, rice syrup. I don't even understand how you get that much sweetness into a product. Anyway, so I'm like, I'd rather have a Mars bar because at least it tastes good. And at least I know I'm going to, enjoy it. And I'm not lying to myself about eating some sort of like, deceptive fiber, fucking like Trojan horse. Like this thing.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, absolutely fiber's good for me. I'm going to go buy some kale.
Yeah, like, totally.
Like, I'm going to have my Mars bar and some kale, and then I'm going to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, man, I'll just like wrap that fucking Mars bar up in some kale, maybe throw in a blender. That's all good.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
Nah, oh my God. There's no better way to eat kale, in my opinion.
I do enjoy
Kale's a great medium for anything. But it's
you
just
try that.
it's it's like sounds like a slightly healthier version of what do you call it, epic mealtime.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of bacon, kale wrap stuff.
Yeah, if they ever had kale in there, that'd be great.
But like, when you were talking about sort of we were talking about the train and the fitness train and something awesome at its core, and you even brought up coconut water, and which is fantastic. And it's one of those things though where I'll still go and look at labels because there's so many companies coming out.
Totally.
And I notice a lot of people who will even go, "Oh yeah, I was down in the Caribbean and we were just eating young coconuts and drinking the water, and it was so awesome." And then so I come up here and I drink stuff and I'm like, oh, this doesn't taste anything like it.
No. Yeah.
And I mean, if you can, just go to a grocery store, most of them have them, buy a young coconut, and then just YouTube how to open a young coconut. It's the easiest thing. Like,
fucking hammer.
I did a demo for like all of my parents,
Machete.
like my mom and my dad, and we were like sitting watching the World Series, passing around like a coconut drinking. It was this weird mix of cultures. It was really odd, but they were like, oh my god, this is delicious. Like, coconut tastes like this? And it's like, yes, I have opened your eyes to the ways of coconuts.
Coconuts. They are, it's crazy how good that food is for you. You know, from the water to the meat to the oils and the butters. So there's all these like coconut products. We actually have a lot of them at the academy, and they're fucking great for you, right? Like the
that's where I was introduced to Blue Monkey, which is
Blue Monkey's pretty good.
One of the coconut waters.
I used to like back in the this is my coconut cred, okay? This is my coconut street cred. But back in the day when I was actually a raw food vegan at this point, one of my raw food vegan buddies, because we hang around in packs, right? Because no one else will talk to us.
Yeah, you have to.
We have to have our own little social scene. And so he turned me on to coconuts from Chinatown. So we would just like on our breaks go to Chinatown on Spadina here in Toronto and then grab a case of coconuts, and they would just be like chilled and fresh and cold. And if you're really good, like they're peeled and stuff, if you're really good, you can just with one hit take a straw and go boom, just like straight into it if you've got like precision and accuracy. So and we would just be like walking down with these like giant coconuts. This is like way before this whole coconut water craze has hit.
Your coconut story is like my yellow handlebar story.
Exactly. We were the tipping point for coconut water. And so that's when I see all this like coconut water, I'm like, whatever, please. that's old news, right? I'm just it's so funny, but coconut water is it's really good, really good when it's from like a fresh coconut. Fresh, like I mean, actually from a coconut. It's totally different. Totally different. But you'll see a lot of people now with this whole, zeitgeist of coconut water being awesome. They'll start to manufacture just horseshit products. Like they'll do coconut water infused with high fructose corn syrup, and gluten and and other things.
This like weird jelly. You were speaking about, actually, there's something I wanted to look up. But you're speaking about sort of that idea in fitness and like vulnerability, and it made me think of this TED Talk video, and I know you love TED Talks.
I do.
Brené Brown. Have you seen her TED Talk?
What's it on?
It's basically on the idea of vulnerability on both sides. On the side of it being something essential to living sort of a happy, fulfilling life, but it's also on the flip side of also being scared and nervous because I remember what you said. You talked about like people just eating like shit, and there's all these different health messages that are conflicting, and she goes, and she's speaking to Americans at this point, but she said it kind of goes really well for Western society. Like, we are the fattest, most medicated, most addicted we've ever been in our history. And she said, because basically she kind of boiled it down and it's a 20-minute video, so go to TED.com, check it out, Brené Brown. But essentially she says it's this cycle of we as a people don't want to feel the bad feelings, we want to feel the good feelings.
Right.
So we try and numb the bad feelings.
Totally.
And you do that with, it's funny, she's like, you drink a box of wine and have a banana muffin. and then you kind of chill out and you try to take this
Why
like
would you
nice
need the muffin?
I think she was actually kind of going into like
To make you feel
the
healthy.
muffin you think it's healthy,
Right.
but it's like loaded with a bunch of crap in it,
Right.
so it's not. You're like trying to tell yourself you're being healthy but treating
Right.
yourself at the same time.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
It's
just-
like supposed to make up for it somehow.
Yeah. And it was just like it's like banana muffin was the analogy for our conflicted dietary messages.
Yeah.
And then she's like, and then, you know, you go and you like meditate or you take a bath, and then the sort of, but bad feelings come too. So you go back to the box of wine and the banana muffin, and it's just this constant cycle.
Yeah.
And that's where she got to vulnerability. And she's like, if you embrace that you have to take the bad with the good. It's sort of, and
So you're saying that, well, you're kind of paraphrasing and saying that we're not so good at feeling bad. And what we try to do is mask the bad. And what that is essentially causing is a real whole lot of bad. And it's kind of a vicious cycle.
yeah, because
So we're essentially kind of on this almost legal food-based kind of heroin. You know what I mean? Constantly in the state of numbness.
yeah, because it's a lot of it's kind of all from the same point. A lot of whether it's self-medication through alcohol or just eating a lot of like just terrible like
Yeah.
eating like bags of Doritos every night
Sure,
or something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
It's almost worse in a way. You know what I mean? I've thought long and hard about this. Like the obvious drug problems and addiction problems, again, they're obvious. So when people are strung out on drugs or even oxys or, you know, legal drugs, pharmaceuticals, it's obvious and there's treatment for it. There's rehab and this and that. But when you're strung out or even mildly strung out on junk food and negative energy and, you know, bad physical habits, when you're addicted to those things, you know, those patterns, it's worse. It's worse because it's so low level compared to some of the other more dramatic problems and addictions that you almost don't take care of it, right? Like if you have a bad diet, like a really bad diet, and your idea of health is you wake up and, you know, you eat a bowl of like, you know, cereal and chase it with, you know, a multi-grain donut or something and then have, you know, a fiber one and, you know, just kind of come home at night and pound back a few beers and, you know, you kind of don't really physically do anything that's very challenging or you know, you don't do anything at all. It's pretty bad. You know, you're going to start to fall into some real poor habits. You're not going to be very mentally focused. You certainly won't be very spiritually focused, which I don't necessarily like to use that word, but it's very important that you have some sort of direction in your life, that you feel like you have a particular, you know, goal in mind for your life. And if you don't have that, if you're kind of just, you know, floating around in this like, like what's like the first third of Fight Club, where Ed Norton is kind of in this like metaphysical, in this kind of like spiritual wasteland where he's just sitting on the toilet and ordering like IKEA furniture from a catalog, and he just finds no meaning in anything. And that's the dude. Like he's got lifestyle addictions. And I firmly believe we are very much sold a whole batch of products, right? In our current setup, you know, here in our culture, that keep us on this little hamster wheel. Yeah. Right. And I don't necessarily think there's this like, you know, mastermind conspiracy of like 2 or 3 people in some bunker that are, you know, essentially, you know, trying to manipulate the world. I think it's kind of maybe it's like a frog in a boiling water situation where we've built up this kind of system.
Yeah. And I think that makes a lot more sense.
I think so. I mean, it almost doesn't even matter like what, like if it's one guy or just if it's a conspiracy of people or if it's just like in general just the way things are. It doesn't matter. The point is that there's problems out there. And I don't know if I talked to you about this, but I was reading this really interesting book, and it talks a little bit about this particular issue and how maybe we got to some of these problems that you know, we have right now. So the book was it was called Shop Class for Soulcraft, I believe. And it was a neat book. So I was reading this one chapter, and it made some very interesting points. There was a time, basically it was during the during the onset of the assembly line. Okay, so Henry Ford designs this amazing vehicle, right? He designs what is it, the Model T? Is that the first car?
Model T. He invents the assembly line. We've got mass production now.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that is that he invents the car. He invents the way to make the car, and he has nobody to work it. He has nobody to be on the assembly line. And the reason is, up until that point, people who were considered laborers were essentially like artisan craftsmen.
Yeah, and you'd make like a product from start to finish.
Totally, yeah. It's like,
because the idea of doing one part, like you wouldn't make just the head of a hammer. You'd make the whole hammer.
You make the whole hammer. You'd cut the tree down. You would whittle the wood. You would do all the things it takes. You'd hammer out the whatever. Get another hammer that you made and hammer out that metal. Whatever. You'd make the whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
And so there was a certain lifestyle to that. There was a certain degree of satisfaction to being a craftsman, where you can kind of just make anything with your bare hands. And what happened was these what you would call like blue collar, handy worker people, they were highly intelligent because they could do a lot of complex shit. So none of those guys were at all interested in working on an assembly line where, work was so compartmentalized that it was completely mind numbing, right? They wouldn't want to trade their lifestyle for that lifestyle. So what they started to do was offer high incentives. So basically they offered to pay a hell of a lot of money to people for people to work on these jobs, way more than they initially had intended on. And so what ended up happening was they were able to pull some workers into this line of work, but they didn't get the results they wanted because people didn't want to work full days. They were like, all right, cool, we're just going to work half a day, make enough money, and then check out. Right. Because really, we don't need that much money to live. We can live off the land. We can make all our own shit. We can hunt our food. We're fucking good. So
yeah, like they didn't need to, they weren't like, oh, I gotta save up to buy my iPad and pay off my house and
exactly. They're like, what are you gonna give me this fucking funny green paper for? Like, I don't even need it, really, right? So that's what started to happen. And so okay, so then they're like, okay, well, what's gonna happen? How are we gonna make this system work, right? So and I don't remember specifically when this came about, but what started to emerge was this field that they called consumption engineering, which is advertising, marketing.
Yeah.
What they started to do was manufacture the need for products, meaning you need this green paper stuff to buy all these things that you didn't know you needed, but now you need. And so they started to play with people's desires, right? They start to manipulate in a creative way. So now, the worker would be willing to sacrifice a big chunk of his life, at least 8 hours a day, right? At the very least, in order to buy this stuff, which he didn't even know he needed, but now he thinks he does, right? So now the machine begins to turn. And some other things started to happen as well, like the idea of credit. So, there was a time where credit was actually like if you had to borrow money, it was frowned upon. You were looked down upon if you had to borrow money. Right. That meant your life wasn't, you didn't have your shit together. Someone had to give you something. So it wasn't cool to have credit. But then they started to flip it. So they changed the idea. So if I give you money, if I give you credit, it means you can be trusted. So, hey, look at you. We can trust you with a whole bunch of money that you got to pay back. Right. So this idea of living beyond your means came in. Right. So all these paradigms began to get kind of inserted into our I guess central operating system as a culture. And here we go, right? We're working jobs we hate for money that we think we need to buy things we kind of probably don't really need all that much, right? But we think we do. And the wheel begins to turn, And then what happens as well is, the school system begins to support these notions of a productive worker, a worker who can focus on one particular task. And if you're ADD, for example, so if you're creative, if you think outside the box.
Yeah, not even traditionally ADD, like the whole, like you might be, or there's the whole just like there's a lot of misdiagnosis just because it's someone who just gets bored.
You get bored because, exactly, because shit is boring.
Yeah, it's not necessarily you have like a hormonal imbalance inside your brain that makes you not be able to pay attention.
Well, your hormones are different, and that's fine too. It's not an imbalance though, in my opinion. I mean, someone who's like, like on a psychiatric level, like ill, okay, that's a different story. But in most cases, what happens is essentially the system that evolves, again, selects for a particular type of worker. It selects for a particular type of person who can pay attention, deliver on orders, and essentially follow this kind of hierarchy. And what begins to happen is knowledge is consolidated at the very top, meaning the workers, the blue collar, quote unquote people, they're not those very interesting, skilled craftsmen anymore. They're people who can put a widget, they can put a widget together, right? They can put one thing in a box all day. And so the assembly line keeps on going, and these people become dumber and dumber and dumber, and the knowledge gets consolidated by very few people at the very high ends of a company, for example, because they're the ones who are making decisions. They're the ones who are doing all the planning. So you start to develop this kind of separation in classes much more, economics change. And again, this idea really kind of comes to, and I'm gonna use the word. It's a very heavy loaded word, but slavery is a word that comes to mind. And I feel that there's this kind of serfdom that happens in certain cultures. Like, I think when you look at some of the very impressive cultures, when I say impressive, I mean they were able to produce a lot of big things very quickly. They did it because they had serfs. And certain countries like China essentially have a very poor record of human rights, and they have serfs. And I feel like in North America, there's cultural serfdom as well. Like we are on this kind of hamster wheel where we work jobs that we really don't enjoy in order to get things, in order to get money to pay for things that essentially keep us going and going and going. And rarely do we question, why we're doing it. So it's a very complicated thing where we're led to these kind of, this state of low-level misery. Just enough to kind of keep us, from really, enough to keep us enslaved, but not enough to really make us break out.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just enough to, like, on Friday night, let loose.
And get
on
fucking
the
hammered drunk. And just do a little bit of coke. And just fucking, maybe we'll score some perks or oxys off someone. And it's like, that's it. And then you fucking go and you brag. It's like, man, I got so trashed. I did this crazy shit. You know what I mean? And, I fucking threw up all over my little shoebox $400,000 condo that I can barely afford.
Yeah. Right?
And you get into this fucking crazy, crazy nonsense. And I know I sound like potentially kind of a hippie saying all this stuff, but it's kind of true. And when we're talking about Fight Club, I think one of the reasons that movie, like, you got to watch that movie probably at least every 2 or 3 months, is to remind you just how we can get caught up in these little fucking these little misery scenes.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things where I think it's like important to have. I was talking with someone about this idea of awareness of self and mindfulness.
Yeah. And
you were talking about spirituality, and I was like, if you want to boil it down to even a smaller concept and maybe not even something as lofty, just having mindfulness, having a presence of where your head's at, why you're doing stuff, why you're actually feeling things. Like, sometimes I was talking with a friend about how periodically we'll get so, and especially it's with the change of the seasons, that we'll be like, oh, we want a completely new wardrobe. Mm-hmm. And I was like, do we have shirts? Do we have pants? Like, are we warm? Are we clothed? Yeah. So what is it? Like, are our clothes actually bad and need to be replaced?
Right.
No. So why do we have this huge need? And we'll sit back and we'll, like, think about it, and it might be a dissatisfaction with something much bigger in our life. Maybe it's like a relationship, a living condition. Maybe it's the food we're eating. Or it could just be as simple as, I don't want to consume something, I want to be creating something. Like, I'm in between, for me, I'm in between art projects. And I'm like, I really need to do something. So if you follow me, for example, on Instagram, I have this daily journal.
Yeah, your notebook.
My notebook. And I it's super organic, and I write and draw, and then I take a photo and I put it on Instagram. And one of the things is just this repetitive aspect of creating. It's forcing myself that I need to draw and get stuff out of my head in a creative way every single day.
Yeah, it's interesting because creativity, it's a certain kind of work. It's not just like this flowy whatever is whatever thing. It's like you have to work at tapping into something really deep and know how to access it continually.
Yeah, and it's
It's a lot of habits.
yeah, you have to have a lot, and I think I was reading this, and I've referenced it before. This book, I think it's all great artists steal.
Yeah.
And the guy goes, this idea of the bohemian lifestyle, get it out of your head. He goes, get a regimen. Take care of yourself, be healthy. I was talking with another friend, and she's reading another sort of book to inspire creative writing, and it's like, wake up and write 3 free-flowing pages every day. Like 3 pages of where you just write and you get this critic out of the way. And I was like, well, does it have to be 3? And she goes, I think having a system is important. And
yeah,
I think those things maybe slightly inherent. You were talking about taking them and putting them into the workforce, and you come and you do this specific task for these 8 hours a day. Like, we like repetition, and there's comfort in that.
Yeah.
But it's like, how can you use sometimes, I think, repetition to force yourself to look inwardly and go, why can't I go out and have 2 beers with some friends? Like, why do I need to either get super drunk, or like, why now am I feeling like I have to like completely overindulge in this extra large pizza? Like, where is that coming from?
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a lot of really interesting things, and I agree with you. We do function on habit, right? And it's kind of this point where when habits go from being productive to improductive, or unproductive, excuse me, and it can be a fine line sometimes, right? Like, drinking is a good one. It can open you up. It could be freeing of the mind. It could relax you, but then it could get completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But don't get me wrong. I love our civilization. I love iPhones. I love the way we're able to communicate.
Oh yeah, it's like consumerism isn't bad.
No, it's not bad.
It's just be mindful, like.
And I just mean be mindful of who, I would say question. Question. Be mindful of what your place is here. That's why I said, spirituality is important as far as health is concerned, and I don't attach this like spirituality to any particular religion at all.
Right. It's just it's the idea of like believing something bigger than, at least for me, something bigger than yourself.
No, in my opinion, not even bigger. Like, I think believe in yourself, because I think that we are all. I constantly use this analogy of radio. We're like radio receivers.
Yeah.
Right. So we're here. We can receive certain signals. I really feel creativity is can be explained in this way, where we feel like we tap into something. It's not necessarily something we've created, but we're just able to maybe tune ourselves in such a way that we're open to a particular idea, right? And I really believe this, and this is definitely not my theory. I've heard it through several other people. Other people say it, but this idea that we're receivers for information, and so when I say the I guess spirituality I'm talking about is working on yourself through fucking fitness, diet, meditation, being around positive people who I would say like support your goals, and figuring out what you want out of your life, right? Figure out what the plan is, and don't be afraid to change the plan. Like, if the plan doesn't work, change it, but at least have something that you can follow. And I would say it's probably got to be bigger than just some like, I'm going to work this job for this many years, retire, and then just kind of chill till I kick the bucket. I really feel you should have something that incorporates your own natural talents, your love, your desire, a community of people who reflect that, and also you gotta put back. You gotta give something to this world. This world made you. You got to give something back, and I feel when people are firing on all those cylinders, then you got a good chance to be pretty happy. And when you're happy, you contribute to evolution, as a whole for our species. So this is something that I firmly believe in. Maybe it's the reason why I got into physical fitness, because I saw the habits and the rituals of a physical practice as being the base for all this crazy shit that I'm talking right now.
Well, it's funny too, because it's like we take the habit of something physical, like CrossFit workouts, Olympic lifting,
Drumming. Yeah, playing the drums.
What about them?
Play the drums. Drumming's interesting. I started full around with. I played guitar, but started really loving drumming because it was this combination of a very physical task and and things that required rhythm and being in the moment and all these different things. And I feel like drumming is a really cool thing. And I'm talking about like a drum kit. Primarily. Like hand drumming is cool too. But doing, playing a kit is an interesting thing because again, you have all those dimensions there, the physical dimension, the spiritual dimension in terms of, I guess, the music. And
you really get out of your head.
Yeah,
and you're behind a kit.
Yeah, and you have to train all these different things. Like you have to have muscular endurance because if you're tired, if you can't hold on to the drumsticks, if you can't hit,
you have to have like flexibility, especially in like the wrists and your ankles and feet.
Yeah, and if one of those things is not working, like you may have the greatest intent to play this one particular, beat or whatever.
The solo from In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida.
Yeah, you may like, all right, I can do that. I've been, I can totally, I know all the parts, I know where all the things go. But if you don't have the dexterity, if you don't have the subtlety, the muscular endurance to put that out, it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? So there's this physical component to playing that instrument. One of the more physical instruments, and it's really, really cool. When you get everything kind of firing, you feel like your body is just this amazing device. You're not even almost like consciously controlled. Like last episode, we talked about this like consciously or unconsciously competent.
Yeah,
where everything is just flowing. You're barely putting any effort out.
Yeah, you're not thinking like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2.
No,
you're just like boom, ba 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 boom. Like you're just
totally.
You're just going with it, and well, yeah. And if anyone's ever jammed with other musicians, and it like you do not have to be great at an instrument to jam. Like if you can keep tempo, and whether it's a guitar and like put together 3 chords. If it's a drum, you can put like a basic 4-beat sort of rhythm. But when everyone just kind of comes together and you're doing your thing and you're not thinking about, I'm strumming these 3 chords, I'm rocking out this tempo, I'm just like going with it.
Yeah, it feels amazing when you're in sync with like other people or playing instruments. It's amazing. When it clicks, it clicks. Like there's nothing like it. It's the most addictive feeling there is. And I think it's that way without instruments too. Just if you're on the same like idea flow as somebody else, or you're working on a project and you're creative, if you're on the same athletic team and everybody's just kind of pulling together, as soon as I feel like you need a certain degree of ego release. I think you need a certain degree of relaxation and being able to tune yourself into the desires of others and trying to create something that's much bigger than yourself. And that's a cool thing when things kind of sync up.
Yeah, you stop going, oh, this is about me, and this is what I'm doing, or I'm worried about how this is affecting everyone else, because you're just working together, and there's an achievement.
Yeah, there's almost like a consciousness between the group when people get together and are working on the same thing. It's almost separate. It's almost like separate from you. It's like this whole new thing is being created, and it's this amazing effect where people just kind of hop on the same train, and they're all acknowledging this kind of shared experience, and they're all contributing to it. It's a pretty cool thing, and it's really interesting. I think when people learn to do these things much more regularly, it shows you the possibilities of what can happen, right? When people get together, and it's so fucked up because it feels like this is so magical.
Yeah.
But yet it's available to us anytime we want.
Kind of. Like I think I like, because I was, as you were saying that, I was just wondering, like, you're right. I mean, it is available to us anytime. I was just wondering what do we need, or how do we get to the point where we're able to do that? Like where you're able to kind of like go yourself.
That's what
like I think the first thing is showing up.
Oh yeah. You know what? Honestly, it's really simple. It's really simple. You don't stop doing it. You just don't stop doing it, despite how many times you fail. It's such a simple thing, and it's like, try again, but it's true. You will learn anything if you just do it long enough. Maybe it's a 10,000 hour rule, right? But I'm a firm believer that if you can stomach failure and repetition, then you will get good at whatever it is. It's inevitable. So
yeah, not even getting good. I think just like I'm even going.
Like you were talking about writing, right?
Yeah.
So writing is an interesting one for me because in high school I kind of had I wanted to do a lot of things in high school, but one of the things was I wanted to become a writer. And what got me wanting to become a writer was, well, I would be really inspired obviously by things I read, but I would have there was a few moments I had where I was able to produce like a story or poem or whatever that I thought was just like, it was awesome, and I got addicted to the feeling of producing something so rich and subtle, and it just had the perfect phrasing, and I got really inspired by that process. It felt like it was the closest thing to spirituality that I had ever experienced. And what I failed at was I didn't have the habits to sustain that. So I was given these kind of moments, like I have the saying where like a broken clock is right twice a day.
Nice.
Right? So
yeah,
it's like
a good saying.
Yeah, it's like twice a day, like, you're going to be right. No matter what, even if you're broken. So I think I had these broken clock moments where, things just kind of lined up and I was able to pop into a state of consciousness where I can produce something. And some of the works I had, which were, it was mostly writing, some of it was music, but it was mostly writing. They just felt like amazing, like effortless, almost like dictated to me. Like I didn't even have to write them down. And I know this is talked about by everybody who does anything creative. It's just there's these states of mind, these flow states where they don't have almost any control of what's happening, and they're almost just kind of like their own stenographer. They're just recording an experience that's given to them, and that shit would happen to me. And what I ultimately failed at, the reason I'm not a writer, is because I didn't realize that writing is actually exactly what you talked about earlier. It's habit. It's sitting at the typewriter. At the time, I loved typewriters, right?
Oh yeah, typewriters are awesome.
Oh man, just like, yeah, and it's just like the feel of it, the sound of it, the rhythm of it. I couldn't even write with a computer. It was just I couldn't get in the
totally different experience.
Totally different experience. I mean, I think you still able to. I think you still should be able to, but the point is that I got to the point where like, all right, I'm ready to write, and I got really frustrated because what I was writing was shit, and I got into these major blocks, and I would freak out, and I was like, what the fuck's wrong with me? Why can't I write? And I hate everything, and it was really a miserable experience. When you're in a state of blockage, like creative blockage, it's a fucking miserable experience. Like, it sucks. No wonder people turn to, like a lot of artists turn to other methods because it's a fucking shitty place to be. And what I know now is that, to greet that type of experience with like, all right, I got to go through this, man. It's going to fucking suck. It's going to hurt, but I got to have the balls to go through it.
Yeah.
And you know what?
You got to do it.
You got to do it. And it's like just sitting there and just fucking feeling miserable and not enjoying what you do is a huge, huge skill to have.
Yeah, right? It's like, if for the writing thing, it's like just sit there and write something. Just start putting something out. And it's like Seth Godin says, when even like in the brainstorming says, he goes, don't focus on good ideas. Just come up with enough bad ideas. A good idea is going to slip out.
It's momentum.
Yeah, it's like just start. Yeah, like you start doing it. Eventually, like the drumming thing, and when you're with other people and you're jamming, it's like eventually things will start clicking.
Totally, and I think, you know what, if you like, I'll flip it back to the musical thing. In your life, okay, if you write Let It Be. Okay, let's say the Beatles had never written Let It Be.
Right.
Okay? Let's say I wrote Let It Be, and that was the only song I ever fucking wrote. And it came out of, like, serious hard work. My life would almost be justified just by writing that one song. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. If everyone's kind of capable of that one Let It Be. Right? Or whatever. And I think it's just a process of being okay with it all, just like working on it. It's okay. It doesn't matter how much you do. It doesn't matter what comes out, but you got to work on it, and you'll know when you get it, right? and it's cool. Like, and I think the creative process is it's everywhere. And I think where I was really interested in that shop class for Soulcraft kind of example is that the moment we start to take creativity out of our lives in any way, we're back to the caves. Actually I shouldn't even say that. We're back to amoeba, right?
Yeah.
Because there was cave drawings, so.
Yeah, exactly.
There was cave drawings, right? Like, even back then, we had a serious need to express ourselves, to reimagine our world in some different way, and that's such a huge part of what we are, and
I think it's part of the reason social media is so popular.
Is because you have to express yourself.
Because it's like it's some form of an expression, and you'll hear some people criticize it's like, oh, I ate this today, or I'm doing this, and like, who wants to know that? And it's like getting into that. It's just, it doesn't matter. It's getting into that process of creating something, putting your thoughts down. I mean, talking about writing, if you are at a blockage, start writing down the things you ate. Start writing down what's in your dresser. Just putting words out, and then eventually you might start attributing emotions to some of your clothes, and then all of a sudden you're into a story about how you first got your favorite sweater from your grandfather and how that makes you feel. Something like that. Like, things will just start to happen.
Well, you mentioned Seth Godin, and so one of his books, The Dip, which is really has some good things to say. It's like every situation, along the continuum, you're gonna have dips. It's impossible not to. And dips they're not permanent states. You will not be down for forever. It's just knowing that. It's knowing that there is a ascent, right? And simply, and that's what I feel like believing in just that one little nugget of information is really the key. Is that, okay, well, things suck right now. Okay, but I really don't have to do anything even that special. I mean, I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna get myself out of it. But it's just a process of enduring suffering, right? Enduring the anguish of a particular moment, knowing that it's going to ascend, right? And it's not freaking out, and it's not just like abandoning ship and going on and starting a whole other new project. So this is I think the trap that I myself got into quite a bit, and I've seen others do it as well, is they'll pursue something wholeheartedly, whether it be writing or music or whatever, or a career, and they'll do it till it sucks. And when it sucks, they're like, oh, this sucks. What's wrong with it? What's wrong with me? I guess I'm not meant for it, right? And that seems like maybe that's the test. Maybe that's the fucking gatekeeper. Right. And if you don't pass that gatekeeper, then you'll never become a fucking badass at what you do, right?
Yeah.
You'll and Seth Godin says it. It's like in the dividing point between becoming a doctor and not becoming a doctor is organic chemistry. So it's like a ridiculously tough course, right? I think most people fail, but the ones that make it out of it, they essentially go on to become doctors. So it's like we have these things, these barriers, which they seem like they're bad, but they're not bad. It's what makes you exceptional if you pass through them. Yeah. So I think with any process, you boil it down. That's why I like physical training so much, because I can see it so clearly. Because the result out of physical training, let's say it's just even, you pick up a weight, right? And you do it, for 25 times a day, and you notice the progress, and until it gets hard, and then you keep on going through it, and then eventually you bust through that plateau and keep on getting better. It's very easy to see because everything is numeric. It's very simple to understand. The more effort I put into it, and the more I suffer through difficult days, if I don't abandon ship on my whole program, meaning I'm not just going to stay home when I feel like it, I'll keep on going, even though I'm having maybe not so good of a day, I'll see the results. The results are in the numbers. Yeah. And I think the results in anything creative or beyond is the same thing, right? You just got to stick it, and then boom, you're gonna get through that gate.
Yeah, and I think the hard thing is maybe the first few times that you're doing it, even with physical fitness and stuff. It's like you don't know that those results are going to come unless you have someone. And then even when someone's there going, trust me, this will come through. And we get kind of impatient. We look for quick fixes.
Yeah.
And we turn to these horrible things that don't help us at all.
Yeah.
But
very quick fixy.
Yeah, but if you stick with anything for anything worth doing, I think, where it actually legitimately will provide results for a certain number of time, and not even necessarily a long time, you'll see things come through.
It's inevitable, man. It's so fucking simple. You just gotta like nut up and go.
Yeah, it's like last night. He said, how was your night? And I was like, I was thinking about sticking home. But what I did was instead, I said, you know what? In the past, when you've showed up for CrossFit and done a workout, you felt great afterwards. Yeah. So do you want to sit here and feel like I don't know all night? Or do you want to go through a tough workout and then feel awesome afterwards? And then it was like, oh, Brian, are you going to come to yoga? And I was like, every time I've done yoga, it's been difficult throughout it, but then I feel awesome afterwards. All right. Yeah. And then I was like, oh, every time I've showed up for this monthly documentary that's put on by programmers, you might not know the movie, you might not be sure if you like the movie, but then afterwards you feel like smarter and you like it. And each one of those happened. And like the first time I did it, the first time I went to the documentary film festival, first time I went to CrossFit, first time I went to yoga, I was like really skeptical, but they all produce results because they're all inherently wicked things. Yeah, it's crazy how we just have to maybe get to the doorstep sometimes on things and just push ourselves. Yeah. When I was in junior high school, actually before even grade school, I remember like I grew up like pretty depressed. Right now I think it was mostly diet related. I ate like a horrible diet, and it kind of makes sense now why I was pretty low in energy and miserable. So that and my parents fought all the time, so that probably had something to do with it too. But I would wake up, and fairly early on, this was like grade 5, I would wake up and I just so down that I didn't want to go to school. And I remember missing like pretty much half a year once, that just from waking up and be like, I just don't want to face anybody today, and I would just kind of go back to bed and maybe watch some TV for the rest of the day. I know that feeling. It's and the funny thing is that I occasionally still have that feeling. Like I feel that some things you're born with, and they're kind of your cross to bear, but in a way they're there to teach you something. So, for example, today I woke up and for some reason I felt like shit. Like I just felt awful. And when you feel awful physically, mentally, your mind follows, right? Oh yeah. The mind follows the body, totally. And so, and you get negative and you're like, fucking hell, why is it raining? Why is it so cold? Why can't I find my keys? Like, and you just get misery, get on this kind of downward spiral. And that makes you not even want to go out anymore. You just want to lay in bed. And today in particular, I was just like, man, I do not want to leave the house at all. And I was just like, you know what? I know as soon as I just get outside and, get to the academy, I guarantee you things will change. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I said that to myself. I felt like total shit. And it's not like as soon as I said it, I felt better. But I knew if I just put myself in that situation where I was to get out of this place, I knew I'd be good. And that's why I feel what comes with maturity and skill. Like that's a skill. I learned to essentially override my my emotions, right? Or use my emotions in a more favorable way. And I picked myself up and I, took myself out of the house. And so I feel like any degree of progress I've made over the last few years has been because of that overriding, voice. And when I look at points where I haven't made progress, whether it's career or just, projects or just even, in my whole like spiritual state, it's because I haven't put myself past these dips, You can like look and go, oh, I know I'm feeling crappy right now. Like I'm first going to admit that. Like I don't, want to get out of bed or something like that. And then you have something that you can look past. And it could just be going, I know if I go outside and go for a walk, I'll feel better. I know that I don't want to write this, but if I sit down and just start putting words on paper, I'll get there. And it's like you said, faith in yourself. Yep. It's just being like, just look one step further. And if you don't know what that one step further is, I mean, for me, it was like thinking about someone else who has maybe gone through that, and then being like, well, what did they do? And then just start copying them.
Yeah.
Until I get my own steps.
It's really important too to have people around you. Like you actually kind of have to cultivate your friendships, especially once you kind of really understand what you want to get out of life. You really have to make sure you're around a bunch of people who support that in every way.
Yeah, like I was talking about Brené Brown's video about vulnerability, and I had a really awesome friend who's willing to tell me exactly how he feels about me, and I can tell him how I feel about him and what's going on in our lives. And he sort of asked, he's kind of feeling down, and he was like, what is it that enables you to, I know you've felt crappy before, and get past those things? And I was like, and I told him it's my ability to just do that, to admit that I'm feeling crappy, and then if I can't look past it, go to someone else.
I had the craziest realization. What was I fucking doing? I was taking a shower, and so many of my great epiphanies happen in the shower for some reason. Maybe it's
I think people have their like epiphany areas.
Yeah, man, shower is it for me.
So shower's it for you.
Whenever you're feeling bad, take a fucking shower. It will clear half the problems up just like that. But anyway, I was taking a shower, and so I'm doing these like contrast showers. I go really hot, really cold, very healthy for you. There's another quick tip. Go super hot, as much as you can handle, for like 30 seconds, whatever, and then go fucking super cold for like another 30 seconds. You don't even
just
yeah, right then, hot,
right
cold,
then.
hot, cold, and then eventually do it as long as you can take it, work your way up, and then make sure you end on cold. It's great for you.
Like, and on cold.
And on cold, speeds up your metabolism. I feel amazing when I do it. So if I'm ever, especially in the morning, if I'm really like just like dying straight away as soon as I wake up, I want to go back to bed, I'll just like get right into that shower and throw on the cold water. I know I'm good after that. So yeah, you just got to have the balls to do it, which incidentally under cold water also change their fucking shape. So whatever. Anyway, side note. So I had this epiphany during one of these moments, and it's like, boom, the cold comes on, and at first your body just like, tenses up, and it just doesn't want to accept it, and it's trying to protect itself. And it's so funny because I had this like flash of insights, bam, 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 bam. So you have this like protective aspect of you when cold happens, right? Your body, your nervous system, it wants to protect you. It wants to tense up and stabilize itself, right? It wants to conserve heat. And this is protective. This is a very animalistic primal reflex. And I'm like, okay. And I had to think through this. I'm like, I have the benefits of culture and consciousness, and the benefits of control and organization, which is something we talked about last episode. And I was like, okay, well, I know I'm not going to die if 30 seconds of cold water hits me. Yeah, if I fall into, if I was an animal and I was falling into a frozen lake, then yeah, I could probably die. So that makes sense. But this will not make me die. So I just opened up and I started to feel the cold. I stopped fighting the cold and I started to feel the cold. And as soon as I started to feel the cold, I completely stopped reacting to it. And I'm like, this actually feels warm. Cold turned to warm. And I know a lot of people I've talked to have had the exact same, realization. And suddenly your body relaxes and you can tolerate extreme cold. And I was like, whoa, this is pretty cool. And then it hit me. Pain is a flavor, right? And when you look at pain as a flavor, you stop looking at it as good or bad. It's a flavor. It's a stimulus, right? How you respond to it is entirely your choice. And I'm constantly throwing this idea into the context of fighting. So like, for example, like combat between two trained martial artists, right? If a really highly trained fighter sees a fist coming at his face, right? He sees that fist and it's just like coming straight for him. If he's highly trained, what's he thinking? He's thinking, okay, well, this guy's fist is going to hit me. Number one, I'm not going to freak out because I know I got a tough jaw and I can take the punch. And number two, I know he's open, because he's got one hand coming towards me, meaning I could probably pop him. So a really trained fighter will not freak out when pain is about to happen. They'll actually use it as an opportunity. But we tend to get into these traps where we start to greet pain with all this like fucking freaking out and emotional bullshit, and then layers and layers and layers and layers of reactions, and we're essentially out of control, right? We go into like this fight or flight response on usually any kind of like emotional trigger. But the key is to recognize things as you know, essentially optional. We can do whatever we want with them. You know, cold could be cold or it could be hot. It depends on how you know, tune your body to it. And I found that this was a really, really interesting mental exercise, right? To keep on reminding yourself of just that very option. So we got lots of good people helping us out. Chad Magazine is pretty good. So they come out with an issue every couple months or so. There should be one dropping really soon. So I think it's Chad is spelled TCHAD. Our good friends at Sully Wong Sneakers, and now they do like duffel bags and handbags and all this other shit. And the Academy of Lions, as always, is right here. Also like to thank good friends at Bikes on Wheels, Sean and Dan. Give them a shout if you need anything related to bikes, such as yellow handlebar tape. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Get Brian the Brian Cauley Pantone.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. For more information, check out our website, constantlyvaried.net.